You'll never own a home. Not with the way you spend money, not with the way you think. You're not built for that kind of life. My mother said that to me at her own dinner table, in front of my brother, my aunt, and my dad, who didn't say a word to stop her. He just nodded, picked up his fork, kept eating. I was 31 years old. I had $11 in checking and a duffel bag of clothes in the trunk of a car with 200,000 miles on it. So on paper, she wasn't wrong. But she didn't know what was in my other account, the one I never mentioned, the one I'd been building, dollar by dollar, for 6 years, in complete silence. Because I had learned a long time ago that in my family, anything you show them becomes a weapon, and anything you're proud of becomes something to compete with. I didn't argue with her that night. I just said, okay, and asked for the mashed potatoes. 18 months later, I was signing closing papers on a house, not an apartment, not a condo with an HOA that would let my mother feel like she'd been right all along. A house, 3 bedrooms, a yard, a mortgage with my name on it and no one else's. And 4 years after that, my parents would be sitting in my living room, in my house, asking me for something they never thought they'd need to ask me for. This is that story, all of it. The insult, the silence, the 6 years nobody saw, and the night everything my mother said finally came due, just not the way she meant it. Let's go back to where it started. I need to explain something about my family before any of this makes sense, because if I just tell you, my mom insulted me at dinner, you'll think this is a story about one bad night. It's not. That dinner was just the loudest version of something that had been happening my whole life at a lower volume. I'm the older of 2 kids. My brother Danny is 3 years younger than me, and from the time we were little, there was an understanding in our house, never said out loud, but everyone knew it, that Danny was the one who was going to make it, and I was the one who was going to be fine. Eventually, probably, if I got serious. Danny got the good camera for his birthday because he wanted to make videos. I got a secondhand bike because I asked for one, and my parents said a new one was too much for right now. Danny's report cards went on the fridge. Mine went in a drawer, even the ones with A's on them, because there was always a B in there somewhere, and that B was what got discussed at dinner. I don't think my parents woke up one day and decided to have a favorite. I think it happened slowly, the way water shapes a canyon, one small decision at a time, over years, until there was a groove worn so deep, neither of them could see it anymore. Danny was louder, funnier, more obviously ambitious in the ways adults recognize as ambition. I was quieter. I did my homework without being asked. I got a part-time job at 16 because I wanted my own money, not because anyone made me. And here's the thing, nobody tells you about being the responsible one in a family like mine. Responsibility doesn't get you praise. It gets you expectations. Danny could fail a class and it was, he's finding his path. I could get a 91 instead of a 96, and my mother would ask, very calmly, very reasonably, what happened. By the time I was in high school, I understood the rules of the house even if nobody had ever stated them. Danny's dreams were dreams. Mine were phases or practical decisions I'd better be making. Danny's mistakes were growing pains. Mine were character flaws. And money, money was its own category entirely. In my house, money wasn't just money. It was a scoreboard. My mother came from a family with very little, and she'd spent her whole adult life terrified of going back to that. So she watched money like a hawk, everyone's money, not just her own. If I bought a coffee out, she'd comment on it. If Danny bought a $400 pair of sneakers, she'd say, well, he works hard, he's allowed to treat himself. I didn't understand it then. I understand it a little better now. My mother wasn't cruel because she woke up wanting to be. She was scared, and scared people protect the thing they think is most fragile. And somewhere along the way, she decided Danny was the fragile one who needed protecting, and I was the sturdy one who could take a hit. I could take a hit. That much, at least, turned out to be true. I want to be fair to Danny here, because none of this was really his fault. He didn't ask to be the favorite. He just accepted it the way you accept good weather, gratefully, and without asking too many questions about why it was happening to him and not someone else. Danny wanted to be a musician, then a music producer, then someone who worked in the industry, which by his mid-20s meant he was unemployed and living in our parents' basement with very expensive headphones. And every single time Danny needed money, for equipment, for a networking trip to LA, for rent when a roommate situation fell through, my parents found it. They didn't always have it easily. Sometimes my dad would pick up extra hours, but they found it, because in their minds, this was an investment in Danny's future. When I turned 18 and told my parents I wanted to go to community college first to save money before transferring, my mother told me that was smart, very practical, which in our house was a compliment with a small blade hidden in it. Practical was what you said about the kid who wasn't going to do anything remarkable. Practical meant we don't expect much, but at least you won't cost us anything. I worked 2 jobs through school. I transferred to a 4-year university and worked through that too. In a records office filing paperwork for $11 an hour, then $13, then finally $15 by the time I graduated. I did not ask my parents for tuition help, partly because I was proud, and partly, if I'm honest, because I already knew what the answer would feel like, even if the words were, "Of course we'll help." It would come with a ledger. Everything from my mother came with a ledger. Meanwhile, Danny dropped out of his own program in his 3rd year to focus on music full-time. And at the dinner where he announced it, my mother cried, actual tears, and said she was proud of him for having the courage to follow his passion. I sat at that same table having just found out I'd made the dean's list, and nobody asked. I'm not telling you this to make Danny into a villain. He wasn't cruel to me. He was just accustomed. He grew up believing, correctly, that the world would catch him if he fell, because it always had. And I grew up believing, also correctly, that if I fell, I'd better already know how to get back up myself, because nobody was coming. That belief turned out to be the most useful thing my family ever gave me. I just didn't know it yet. I moved out the month after I graduated college, into a studio apartment above a laundromat that smelled permanently like fabric softener and hot metal. It was 400 square feet. The radiator clanked at night like someone was trapped inside the wall. I loved it more than almost any place I've lived since, because it was mine. Fully, in a way nothing in my parents' house had ever really been. I got a job in logistics coordination. Not glamorous, nothing anyone puts on a vision board, but it paid, and it taught me something I didn't expect. I was good at systems. I was good at looking at a messy process and finding the 3 changes that would make it efficient. Within 2 years, I'd been promoted twice. Here's where the money part of this story actually starts, and I want to walk through it carefully, because the 6 quiet years that follow are the entire engine of this story. When I got my first real promotion, at 24, I made a decision that I now recognize as the most important financial decision of my life, and it wasn't complicated at all. I decided that every time my income went up, my lifestyle would not go up with it, not proportionally. I kept living like I made my old salary, and I automated the difference straight into savings and eventually a brokerage account before I ever saw it in my checking balance. It sounds almost too simple to be a strategy. It is almost too simple. Most people don't do it anyway, because it requires you to feel poorer than your paycheck says you are, on purpose, for years, while everyone around you upgrades their apartment and their car and their vacations. I watched friends and coworkers do exactly that. I did not judge them for it. I understood the appeal better than anyone, because I'd grown up watching my brother get rewarded for spending money he didn't have on things that made him feel, for a moment, like he'd already arrived. I didn't want to feel like I'd arrived. I wanted to actually arrive. I read, I want to be honest that I am not a genius and I did not have some secret insider knowledge. I read library books about index funds. I found free calculators online and ran my numbers obsessively on Sunday nights, the way some people do a crossword. I learned what compound interest actually meant, not as a phrase in a textbook, but as a mechanism that would work for me while I slept, while I worked, while I did absolutely nothing, as long as I fed it consistently and left it alone. I made mistakes too. I want to be clear about that, because there's nothing worse than a how I got rich story that pretends the person never stumbled. I put money into a friend's business idea that folded in 8 months, and I never saw a cent of it back. I panic sold some stock during a dip in year 2 and lost money I would have made back easily if I'd just waited. I learned those lessons the expensive way, the way most people do. But I kept going. Every year, the number in that account got a little bigger, and every year, I told almost no one. That second part, telling no one, is the part that made everything else possible. I want to talk about why I kept it a secret, because I think this is the part of the story a lot of people relate to even if their family isn't exactly like mine. Early on, maybe year 2 of saving seriously, I made the mistake of mentioning to my mother, kind of proudly, that I'd started investing. I remember exactly where I was standing in her kitchen. I remember her exact tone, which was not hostile at all, which almost made it worse. She said, "That's nice, honey. Just be careful. You don't really have the kind of money where that makes sense yet." And then, almost as an afterthought, she asked how much I had put in. And when I told her, she made a small sound, not quite a laugh, but adjacent to one, and said, "Well, that's not going to do very much, is it?" It wasn't a huge sum, she was right about that, but it was the sound she made. The little exhale of amusement. It told me everything I needed to know about how this information would be received going forward, not as something to celebrate, but as something to measure me against and find, once again, a little bit short. So I stopped talking about it. Not out of shame, I want to be really clear about that, because for a long time I thought my silence was shame, and it took me years of thinking about it to understand it was actually the opposite. It was protection. I had figured out, the hard way, that in my family, sharing a win didn't multiply it. It shrank it. It got compared to Danny's potential, or minimized as luck, or treated as a reason I should now be generous with money I hadn't earned enough of yet, in my mother's eyes, to be entitled to. So the account grew, and I said nothing. When relatives asked how I was doing, I said fine, busy with work, which was true, and also revealed absolutely nothing. When my mother asked, pointedly, whether I was ever going to get serious about my future, a question she asked with startling regularity for someone who had a whole other child who'd dropped out of school to chase a music career, I would just say something non-committal and change the subject. I dated during these years too, a little, though not seriously, partly because I was working so much, and partly because I'd developed a real wariness around anyone who showed too much interest in what I earned or how I spent it. I wasn't hiding a fortune. Let's be honest about the numbers. By year 4, I had somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 saved and invested, which is meaningful, real money, the product of real discipline, but it is not secretly a millionaire money. It was not enough yet to buy a house outright or make some dramatic gesture. It was just, quietly, steadily, becoming enough to eventually change my life, if I kept going and didn't panic, and didn't tell anyone who might talk me into spending it, or feeling guilty for not spending it. By year 5, it was $78,000. That's when I started actually looking at houses, not to buy yet, just to understand the market, to know what things cost, to start recognizing, in numbers, what my actual goal looked like. And that's roughly where things stood the year of that Thanksgiving dinner. I want to take you fully into this night, because I've told you the line already, but I haven't told you the whole scene, and the whole scene matters. It was Thanksgiving. I was 31. I'd driven 2 hours to my parents' house, the same house I grew up in, with a pie I'd made myself, because my mother always said store-bought pie was for people who don't care enough to try, a comment I'd heard my entire childhood and had at some point simply absorbed as fact rather than opinion. Danny was there with his girlfriend at the time, a perfectly nice woman who spent most of dinner nodding along while Danny explained, at length, an idea he had for a mobile app that would revolutionize how independent musicians get discovered. He did not have a developer, a business plan, or any coding experience. He had an idea, and in my family, an idea from Danny was treated the way other families treat a diploma. My Aunt Carol was there too, my mother's sister, sharp-tongued in the way some older women get when they've decided honesty is the same thing as wisdom. The conversation drifted, as it always did, to money and futures. My mother asked Danny how the app idea was coming, and he talked for what felt like 10 minutes about market validation, a phrase I'm fairly sure he'd heard once and liked the sound of. Everyone nodded. My dad said, "That's my boy, always thinking big," and reached over to squeeze his shoulder. Then my aunt, not unkindly, actually, I think she meant it as a normal conversational turn, asked me, "And what about you? Any big plans? You seeing anyone? Thinking about buying a place someday?" I said something simple. I said, "Actually, yeah, I've been saving up. I'm hoping to buy a house in the next year or two." And this is the part I will remember until I die, because of how casually it happened. My mother didn't even look up from her plate right away. She let out a short laugh. Not a mean, dramatic, villain laugh, just a small, genuine, unthinking laugh, the kind that comes out before a person even decides to let it, and said, "You'll never own a home, not with the way you spend money, not with the way you think. You're not built for that kind of life." The table went quiet for maybe a second and a half. Danny looked down at his plate. His girlfriend suddenly found something very interesting in her water glass. My aunt gave a small, awkward smile, the universal expression of someone who has just watched something happen and doesn't want to get involved. And my father, who I'd always told myself was the more even-handed one, the one who at least tried to be fair, nodded. Just nodded and said, "Your mother's not wrong, sweetheart. You've never really been careful with money." I want to point out, because it matters, that this was not true. I had never once asked either of them for money as an adult. I had paid my own way through the back half of college. I drove a used car with a check engine light I'd learned to ignore. I had not had a vacation in 3 years. There was no evidence, anywhere in my actual behavior, that I was careless with money. There was only the idea of me that had calcified in my family a decade earlier and never been updated, because nobody had ever bothered to ask. I didn't cry. I want you to know that, because I think it matters to the story. Not because crying would have been weak, but because I think the reason I didn't cry is the same reason everything that came after was possible. Something in me had already, quietly, stopped needing their belief in order to keep going. I had been building proof for 6 years that they simply hadn't seen, because I'd never shown them, and in that moment, some old, hopeful part of me finally understood there was no point showing them now either. They weren't going to be persuaded by evidence. They'd already reached their verdict a long time ago. So I just said, okay, picked up the serving spoon, and asked if anyone wanted more mashed potatoes. My mother looked almost disappointed that I hadn't reacted more. I think some small part of her wanted a fight, wanted the drama, wanted to feel like she'd said something important enough to land. Instead, she got mashed potatoes. I left that night a little after 9. In the car, in the driveway, I sat for a minute before starting the engine, and I did something I want to describe honestly. I opened my banking app on my phone, and I just looked at the number for a while. $78,412. Not because I needed to check it. I already knew what it said. I think I just needed, in that moment, to look at proof that existed outside of my mother's opinion of me. Then I drove home. I didn't make some big dramatic vow that night, the kind you see in movies, where the character stares into a mirror and swears revenge. That's not really how it happened. What actually happened was smaller and, I think, more honest. I just got quieter and more focused. Over the next few weeks, I started treating the house search like a second job. I met with a lender to understand exactly what I qualified for, which was humbling in a useful way. Not because the number was small, but because it made the whole thing suddenly concretely real, in a way someday never had been. I got pre-approved. I started looking at listings every single night, not idly, but with a spreadsheet, tracking price per square foot, property taxes, commute times, school district ratings even though I didn't have kids, because I understood resale value mattered even on a first purchase. I cut things I didn't need to cut before. I'd already been frugal, but I got sharper about it. I canceled subscriptions I wasn't using. I started meal prepping instead of getting takeout twice a week. I picked up freelance logistics consulting work on weekends for extra income, all of which I funneled directly into my house fund, which I mentally started calling exactly that, the house fund, in my head, in capital letters, like a small private flag I was flying that nobody else could see. I did not tell my parents any of this. I did not tell them I was pre-approved. I did not tell them I was looking at listings. Part of this was self-protective. I didn't want another, "you're not built for that kind of life" conversation, while I was in the middle of trying to actually do the thing. But part of it, I'll admit, was something a little less noble and a lot more human. I wanted to be finished before they knew I'd started. I wanted the reveal, if there was ever going to be one, to be a fact, not a plan they could poke holes in or helpfully discourage before it had a chance to exist. I told exactly 2 people during this stretch. A close friend from work named Priya, who'd bought her own place 2 years earlier and became something like an unofficial mentor, walking me through inspection reports and closing costs with more patience than I probably deserved. And my brother Danny, actually, oddly enough, near the very end of the process, because he called me one night just to talk, no agenda, and something about the ease of that particular conversation made me let it slip that I was closing on a house in 3 weeks. Danny's reaction surprised me. He didn't say anything competitive or dismissive. He just went quiet for a second and said, "That's really cool, actually. I'm proud of you." Then, a beat later, "Don't tell Mom yet, though. Let it be your thing for a minute." It was the most useful advice anyone in my family had given me in years, and he probably didn't even realize how much it meant. I didn't tell Mom yet. I let it be my thing. I've been telling this story mostly in scenes, but I want to take a minute to zoom out, because I think the day-to-day reality of building something like this gets lost if I only tell you the highlight moments. So let me compress 6 years into something closer to what it actually felt like, month to month. It felt like saying no to things. Not in a miserable, deprived way. I want to be clear, I wasn't living some grim, joyless existence. I had dinners with friends. I had a life. But it felt like saying no to the upgrade, the nicer apartment when my lease was up, the newer car when the old one needed another repair, the destination wedding invitations that I attended by flying the cheapest possible route and staying the minimum number of nights. It felt like a lot of Tuesday nights doing my own taxes with a spreadsheet instead of paying someone, learning the tax code out of necessity rather than interest, because every dollar I didn't spend on a service I could learn to do myself was a dollar that stayed in the house fund. It felt like watching my coworkers post vacation photos and feeling, honestly, a real pang of wanting that too. I'm not going to pretend the discipline never cost me anything emotionally. There were nights I sat with my spreadsheet open and genuinely wondered if I was being smart or just afraid. If there was a difference, if I was going to wake up at 50 having never taken a real vacation and having missed the point of being alive in the process. I don't think there's a clean answer to that worry. I think you just have to keep checking in with yourself honestly, which I tried to do, and recalibrate when the balance felt wrong. A few times I did spend a real vacation in year 3, a decent bike, dinner out more than I should have, some months. Because a plan that allows for zero joy isn't a sustainable plan, it's just a diet, and diets fail. It felt like promotions that I earned by being genuinely good at my job, not by network or luck. I moved from logistics coordinator to operations manager by year 4, which came with a real jump in salary, all of which, per my original rule, got absorbed into savings rather than lifestyle. And it felt like an almost embarrassing amount of quiet, private satisfaction every single time I checked that account and watched the number tick upward. A satisfaction that had nothing to do with what I could buy with it, and everything to do with what it proved. To myself, mostly, since I wasn't showing anyone else. It proved that the version of me my mother had described at that dinner table simply didn't exist. It never had. By the time I sat down with a lender the first time, seriously, not just browsing, I had built something real, savings, a solid credit history because I'd been careful with every card and loan I'd ever had, a stable income, and 6 years of receipts, literal and figurative, proving I was exactly the kind of person banks like to lend money to, which is, not coincidentally, exactly the kind of person my mother had told a room full of family members I could never become. I found the house on a Tuesday night, scrolling listings after work the way I had 100 times before. Except this time something made me stop scrolling. It was small. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, built in the 60s, with a kitchen that clearly hadn't been updated since roughly the Clinton administration, and a backyard with an enormous old maple tree that dropped leaves the size of dinner plates. It needed work. The listing photos weren't trying to hide that, but the bones were good, the neighborhood was solid and getting better, and, this is the part that actually decided it for me, the price was $30,000 under what I'd budgeted for, because the ugly kitchen and dated bathroom had scared off buyers looking for something move-in ready. I saw it in person on a Thursday. I put in an offer on Friday. It was accepted, after one small round of negotiation, the following Monday. I want to describe the inspection day, because it's one of my favorite memories from this whole stretch of my life, and it's a small, unglamorous moment that I think captures something true. I stood in that empty, ugly kitchened house with the inspector, a no-nonsense man in his 60s named Walt, who'd clearly done this 10,000 times and had zero interest in small talk. And I watched him check the water heater and test the outlets and thump on walls, and I felt something I don't think I'd ever felt before in relation to anything financial. I felt calm. Not excited, exactly. Calm. Like something that had been braced for a long time was finally allowed to unclench. Closing day was a Tuesday in March, 18 months after that Thanksgiving dinner. I sat in a small office with a title company representative and signed my name more times than I thought was reasonably necessary. And at the end of it, she slid a set of keys across the table and said, "Congratulations, you're a homeowner." In the slightly bored tone of someone who says that sentence 4 times a day, and it still hit me like a wave. I drove to the house by myself afterward. I didn't call anyone first. I let myself in through the front door with my own key, into a house with my name on the deed, and I stood in that ugly, empty kitchen and I cried. Finally, here, alone, which felt right. Not sad tears, the other kind. The kind that come out when something you weren't sure would ever happen, happens. I called Priya first, then Danny. I did not call my parents that day. I wasn't ready yet, and honestly, I wasn't sure I owed them the moment at all. Some victories. I was starting to learn, you're allowed to just keep for yourself. I moved in over the following 2 weekends with help from Danny and 2 friends, a rented truck, and way too much pizza. I painted the ugly kitchen myself over a series of evenings. I planted something in the backyard under that big maple tree, even though I had no idea what I was doing, because it felt important to put something living into ground that was finally, actually mine. I didn't tell my parents I'd bought a house for almost 4 months. I know how that sounds. I've thought about it a lot, and I don't think it was spite exactly, though I won't pretend there wasn't some of that mixed in. Mostly, I think I just wanted the house to exist fully as mine, painted, lived in, settled, before I let it become a subject of family conversation, commentary, and reinterpretation. They found out, in the end, in a very unglamorous way. My mother saw a photo on Danny's phone. He'd come over to help me build a bookshelf, taken a picture of the finished result for himself, and made the mistake, a completely understandable one, since he had no idea it was still a secret from our parents, of having it visible in his camera roll when my mother borrowed his phone to check a recipe. She called me that same night. I remember the exact opening of the conversation, because it tells you everything about how these dynamics work even after everything else has changed. She said, "Danny showed me a picture of a house. He said, 'It's yours?' Not congratulations, not tell me about it. A question, almost suspicious, like I might be house-sitting, or lying, or somehow claiming something that wasn't really mine. I said, 'Yeah, I closed back in March.' There was a pause. Then, 'How? I don't understand how you could afford that.' And I want to tell you, in that moment, some old part of me, the part that had spent 31 years wanting this exact conversation to go a certain way, wanted to explain everything. The 6 years, the spreadsheet, the freelance work, the vacations I didn't take. I wanted, badly, for a second, to make her understand and be proud. But I'd learned something by then, and I said instead, simply, I saved for it. For how long? A while. She didn't apologize. I want to be honest about that, because I think it's important for anyone listening to this who's waiting for the moment their own parent says, "I was wrong, I'm sorry." Sometimes that moment just doesn't come. Not clearly, not in the shape you want. What I got instead was a kind of confused recalibration, delivered a little defensively. "Well, that's good. I'm glad you figured that out. I just always worried about you, that's all it ever was." It wasn't an apology, but I let it be enough, for that night, because I was tired, and because I'd already gotten the thing I actually wanted, which wasn't her apology at all. It was the house. Here's where the story turns again, about 2 years after I moved in. Danny's music career, if I'm honest, never really became a career. The app idea from that Thanksgiving dinner never got past a few napkin sketches. He'd cycled through a handful of jobs, some music adjacent, most not, and had been living with a girlfriend whose apartment he'd moved into, which had felt, for a while, like a stable arrangement. Then they broke up, and Danny, 29 years old, found himself needing somewhere to live, with very little saved, because saving had simply never been asked of him the way it had been asked, implicitly, of me. My parents took him in, which surprised no one. What surprised me was what happened about 8 months later. My dad had a health scare, nothing ultimately fatal, thankfully, but a cardiac event that meant a hospital stay, a recovery period, and a very real, very sudden dip in his ability to work the extra hours he'd relied on for years to keep the household budget balanced. My mother worked too, but not at a salary that could absorb a serious gap on its own. And with Danny back in the house, unemployed more often than not, contributing very little financially, the math in that household stopped working in a way it had always precariously worked before. I found this out the way I found out most things about my family by that point. Secondhand, through Danny, in a phone call where he sounded genuinely scared for the first time in his adult life. He told me they'd fallen behind on the mortgage. Not catastrophically, not yet, but 2 payments behind, with a third coming due, and a lender who was starting to send letters with words like default in them. I sat with that news for a few days before I did anything. I want to be honest about the feeling that came up in me, because I don't think it's a flattering one, but I think it's a human one. Some small, old, hurt part of me felt something almost like satisfaction. The house they'd told me I'd never own, the actual physical house I'd grown up in, where that Thanksgiving dinner had happened, was now at risk, while mine sat 2 hours away, paid for, growing in value, entirely secure. I didn't enjoy that feeling, but I noticed it, and I let myself notice it honestly instead of pretending I was above it. Because I think pretending you're above your own complicated feelings is how you end up making decisions you don't understand later. Then I thought about what I actually wanted to do next. My mother called me herself, eventually, which told me how serious things had gotten, because my mother did not like asking for things, especially not from me. She didn't lead with the request. She led with small talk that neither of us was really invested in. How was work? Had I done anything to the backyard lately? Before she got, haltingly, to the actual point. Your father and I are going through kind of a rough patch, she said. Financially, it's temporary. But I wanted to ask, I know this is a big ask, if there's any way you'd be able to help us out, just to get caught up, we'd pay you back. I let the silence sit for a second longer than was comfortable, not to punish her, exactly, but because I genuinely needed the moment to figure out what I actually felt and wanted, rather than reacting on instinct. How far behind are you? I asked. She told me. It was a real number, meaningful but not impossible. The kind of number that, 6 years earlier, would have represented my entire net worth and then some, and that now represented a manageable fraction of what I'd built. I have that, I said, and I heard her exhale, relieved, on the other end of the line. But I want to think about how I want to do this, I told her. Give me a couple of days. She agreed, a little confused, I think, that I hadn't just said yes on the spot. I think some part of her expected either an immediate yes, out of guilt or duty, or an immediate no, out of old resentment. What she didn't expect was a considered pause, because a considered pause implied I had actual power in the situation, the power to decide, not just the power to comply or refuse, and I don't think she'd ever really pictured me holding power like that before. I spent those 2 days thinking hard and talking it through with Priya and with Danny, and, a little, with myself in the mirror, about what kind of help I actually wanted to offer, and on what terms, because I'd learned by then that the 6 years of silence hadn't just built me a house. They'd built me the standing to set the terms of a conversation I never used to have any say in at all. I drove to my parents' house on a Sunday. My dad was up and moving, slowly but recovering. Danny was there too, having asked to be, I think because he wanted to support me, or maybe support all of us, in whatever this conversation was going to be. We sat at the same dining table where that Thanksgiving dinner had happened years earlier. I noticed that detail. I don't think anyone else did. I told them I would help. I want to be clear about that up front, because this isn't a story about refusing my family in some triumphant act of revenge. I don't think that would have actually felt like a win to me, and I'd spent too many years defining myself against my mother's expectations to then let her define, by absence, what kind of person I'd become. I wanted to help because they were my parents, and my father had just had a real health scare, and the number, for me, was genuinely manageable. But I also, finally, told them everything. I told them about the 6 years. I told them about the studio apartment above the laundromat, and the spreadsheet I'd kept every single Sunday night, and the vacations I skipped, and the freelance work on weekends, and the $78,000 I already had saved on the night of that Thanksgiving dinner, when my mother told a table full of family that I'd never own a home. I told them, calmly, without raising my voice, that I remembered the exact words she'd used. I said them back to her, once, clearly. You'll never own a home, not with the way you spend money, not with the way you think. My mother's face did something complicated when I said it, a kind of flinching recognition, the look of someone hearing their own words repeated back to them and realizing, maybe for the first time, how they'd actually sounded. I said that? She asked quietly, and I believed her. I think she genuinely hadn't remembered, because to her it had been one comment among thousands, forgotten as soon as it left her mouth, while to me, it had been load-bearing for a year and a half of my life. You did, I said. Dad agreed. My father, to his credit, didn't try to defend himself. He just said, quietly, "I'm sorry. I should have said something different that night. I've thought about that dinner more than once since, actually, and I never liked how it went." I told them the number I could offer, enough to bring the mortgage current and give them breathing room for several months. And I told them the one condition I was attaching to it, which wasn't about repayment schedules or interest. My condition was that Danny needed to get a real, steady job, any job, within 60 days, and start contributing to the household, because I wasn't willing to help stabilize a situation that was going to destabilize again in 6 months for the exact same reason. Danny, to his enormous credit, didn't push back. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, that's fair. I should have done that a long time ago." My mother cried, finally at that table, not the performative kind I'd half expected, but something quieter and more real. She reached over and took my hand and said, "I don't think I ever really saw you. I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't undo a decade of comparison and dismissal. But it was real, and it was more than I'd had 18 months earlier in that same room, and I let it be enough. Not because I owed her that, but because holding on to the alternative wasn't going to build me anything else worth having. It's been 2 years since that conversation. My dad recovered well. Danny got a job. Not glamorous. Working logistics at a warehouse of all things. A little bit in my old professional footsteps, which we both find quietly funny. And he's kept it. And he's actually good at it. Better than I think even he expected to be. He moved into his own place last year. Small, but his. My parents caught up on their mortgage within 4 months and paid me back most of what I'd given them over the following year, unprompted, in amounts they could actually afford, which mattered to me more than I expected it to. It wasn't about the money. It was about being treated, finally, like someone whose generosity deserved to be respected rather than assumed. My relationship with my mother is different now, not perfect, not some tidy movie ending where every old wound is healed. She still, occasionally, says something that has the shape of an old comparison, an old assumption, and I've learned to name it gently when she does, rather than swallowing it the way I used to. Sometimes she catches herself before I even have to. That's new, and I don't take it for granted. I still own that house. I've since paid down a significant chunk of the mortgage, and last year, using more of what those 6 quiet years built, I bought a second small property, a little 2-bedroom I rent out, which has become the next chapter of the same discipline that got me the first house. Except now, I'm not doing it in secret. My parents know. Danny knows. I talk about money openly with my family now, when it's relevant, because I finally understand that the silence I built wasn't really the point. It was just the tool I needed for a specific season of my life, when the people closest to me couldn't yet be trusted with the truth of what I was building. If there's a lesson in all of this, and I go back and forth on whether stories like this need a tidy lesson at all, I think it's this. The people who underestimate you are not always your enemies. Sometimes they're just wrong, in an ordinary, human, unremarkable way. The way people are wrong about all kinds of things. You don't owe them your plans while you're building. You don't owe them access to your progress just because they share your blood. But you also don't have to let their doubt become the whole story, or let your eventual proof become an act of revenge instead of what it actually is. Just the truth, finally, catching up. My mother laughed and said I'd never own a home. I own 2 now. She was wrong, and for the first time in my life, being right about something didn't feel like it needed her permission to count.